We've been very lucky.
The elite of British high society gathered for a glittering royal banquet, but the night quickly descended into absolute shock. Laura Lopes, the daughter of Queen Camilla, made a staggering entrance that left hundreds of powerful figures completely speechless. Resting firmly on her head was a priceless, historic tiara that once belonged to the late Queen Elizabeth II. As frantic whispers erupted across the room, the situation escalated into unprecedented drama. In full view of the global elite, Princess Anne stood up and took ruthless, decisive action that paralyzed the entire hall. The tension was suffocating. Laura stood frozen in sheer terror, while Queen Camilla watched in absolute silence, completely powerless to stop what was happening. The guests were left deeply confused by the sheer severity of Princess Anne's reaction. No one understood what triggered such a drastic response. No one except Princess Catherine. Just days before the banquet, Catherine accidentally intercepted a highly guarded secret regarding that exact tiara. It was a shadowy conspiracy orchestrated in the dark, carrying enough destructive power to fracture the entire monarchy if exposed. What exactly did Catherine uncover that forced her to rush straight to Princess Anne? And what is the sinister truth behind this historic heirloom that pushed the royal family's most disciplined member to execute such a devastating public takedown? The royal diplomatic banquet was an absolute masterpiece of high society pageantry, assembling the most formidable minds, global dignitaries, and the most ancient aristocratic bloodlines under one magnificent roof. The air was thick with the soaring melodies of a live string quartet and the intoxicating scent of bespoke perfumes. The elite of the world mingled, completely unaware that they were about to witness a historic shattering of royal protocol. Suddenly, the dense crowd parted instinctively, making way for an entrance so audacious it defied belief. Laura Lopes walked into the grand hall. As the daughter of Queen Camilla from her first marriage, Laura had spent her entire life on the periphery of the throne, a woman accustomed to the immense privileges of the palace without ever possessing a drop of sovereign blood. But tonight, she was no longer willing to remain a secondary figure in her mother's shadow. Laura strode forward, her posture radiating an overwhelming arrogance, a deeply satisfied smirk dancing across her lips. What caused the breath to instantly vanish from the lungs of every seasoned diplomat and royal family member in the room was the blindingly brilliant object resting atop her impeccably styled hair. It was the Cambridge Lover's Knot tiara. This was not merely a piece of jewelry. It was a sacred national treasure valued at over $135 million. Crafted during the regal era of Queen Mary, its iconic teardrop pearls swung rhythmically with Laura's every step. It was the ultimate, unquestionable symbol of royal reverence and institutional continuity. For a civilian, a woman completely devoid of royal lineage, to casually parade this sovereign heirloom at a top-tier diplomatic summit was a breathtaking insult to centuries of monarchical hierarchy. A wave of shocked whispers and frantic murmurs swept through the ambassadors and junior royals, but before the scandalized chatter could fully ignite, a formidable figure sliced through the center of the opulent room. Princess Anne, the fiercely loyal daughter of the late Queen Elizabeth II and the living embodiment of royal duty, stepped directly into the spotlight. Even in her 70s, the Princess Royal possessed a terrifyingly commanding presence. She was the immovable pillar of the House of Windsor. Her piercing eyes, sharp and unforgiving as freshly honed steel, locked onto the shimmering diamonds adorning Laura's head, before dropping to meet the younger woman's suddenly terrified gaze. Without the need for a microphone or theatrical amplification, Princess Anne's voice cut through the extravagant banquet hall like a whip. It was cold, absolutely clear, and completely devoid of diplomatic pleasantry. She delivered an immediate, non-negotiable ultimatum. Laura Lopes was to remove the crown jewel from her head that very instant. Every single syllable that fell from Princess Anne's lips struck the arrogant intruder like a physical blow. Anne was not simply asking for the return of a stolen necklace, she was acting as the executioner of royal justice. Her voice dropped to a lethal register as she outlined the horrific gravity of the situation. The unsanctioned removal and display of a sovereign artifact, completely lacking the authorization of the monarch and the strict family council, was a catastrophic offense. It was a brazen defilement of the crown's legacy, and Anne promised that Laura would face the absolute maximum severity of royal and legal retribution. There would be no mercy and certainly no exceptions. Standing entirely frozen behind the imposing marble architecture of a structural column was Queen Camilla, the woman who had spent decades meticulously calculating every move, enduring unimaginable public scrutiny to finally secure her grip on the crown, was now trapped in an inescapable waking nightmare. Beneath the heavy fabric of her exquisitely tailored velvet gown, her entire body seized with uncontrollable tremors. Her aristocratic hands gripped her clutch so violently that the blood drained entirely from her knuckles. Camilla was drowning in a paralyzing wave of sheer panic. This unprecedented display of power was supposed to be a flawless maneuver. It was a highly calculated strike designed to solidify her faction's absolute dominance over the palace hierarchy, utilizing Laura as a psychological weapon to intimidate the blood-born royals. Camilla had orchestrated every microscopic detail. She had personally verified the blind spots and the security clearances. How could Princess Anne, a woman perpetually drowning in global engagements and official state duties, have discovered a plot of such profound secrecy? How could she have intercepted the exact timing with such devastating precision? The towering fortress of confidence that Camilla had painstakingly erected over a lifetime was suddenly reduced to rubble. She was entirely exposed, a mastermind caught in the blinding glare of the sun, desperately grasping at shadows. The catastrophic public execution unfolding in the ballroom had actually been ignited exactly 1 week prior, sparked by the faintest of footsteps in the deepest, most secure corridors of the royal estate. 7 days before the catastrophic banquet, a suffocating silence had descended upon the palace. Behind the impenetrable, heavy oak doors of her private study, Queen Camilla had been setting her treacherous plan into motion. With the door firmly secured against the outside world, her encrypted phone pressed tight against her ear. Her voice was dropped to a conspiratorial whisper, yet the intoxicating thrill of absolute control bled through her words as she finalized the operation with Laura. Their objective was the Cambridge lover's knot tiara. For Camilla, securing this particular relic was not about vanity, it was about psychological warfare. It was the physical manifestation of the supremacy she felt constantly challenged by the direct bloodline royals. Crowning her daughter with this unparalleled artifact was intended to be an aggressive public declaration that the old guard had fallen and her regime now dictated the ancient laws of the monarchy. Through the secure line, the mother and daughter finalized their treasonous logistics. They discussed overriding the primary royal vault access codes and generating fraudulent internal transfer manifests. Drunk on their own perceived invincibility, they fully believed that the Queen's formidable shadow would render the palace staff blind and deaf to their deceit. But the ancient stone walls of the British monarchy have never successfully kept a secret. At the exact second Camilla was reveling in her genius, Princess Catherine happened to be navigating the deeply carpeted hallway outside the study. She was entirely focused on coordinating logistics for a high-profile children's charity gala. However, the frantic, hushed cadence of the Queen's voice completely halted Catherine's momentum. Having navigated the treacherous waters of palace politics for over a decade, Catherine possessed an apex predator's instinct for danger. Through the minuscule gap in the heavy oak door, 3 specific words struck her ears like thunder. Royal Vault, Lover's Knot, Laura.
Pressing her back firmly against the cold stone of the shadowed alcove, Catherine stopped breathing. She absorbed every treasonous syllable that leaked from the study. The Princess of Wales's elegantly composed features contorted through a rapid succession of emotions. Initial shock morphed into horrifying disbelief, finally settling into an abyss of absolute, unyielding disappointment. Catherine comprehended the crushing historical magnitude of Queen Mary's tiara. It was not a prop. It was the crystallized soul of the British Empire, a sacred trust passed down through generations of monarchs. It was never intended to be manipulated as a cheap pawn to satiate the boundless vanity of Camilla's faction. A ferocious tidal wave of loyalty and duty rose within the future queen. She recognized instantly that remaining a passive observer would render her a silent co-conspirator to the theft of her nation's heritage. The moment the encrypted call terminated, Catherine extracted herself from the alcove, moving with ghost-like silence and terrifying speed. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but her mind was remarkably clear. There was only one person capable of executing the ruthless justice this betrayal demanded. She walked directly to the private quarters of Princess Anne. The Princess Royal was the terrifying guardian of the old world, a woman whose integrity could not be bought, intimidated, or negotiated with. By delivering the horrific truth directly into Anne's hands, Catherine effectively armed the monarchy's most lethal defense mechanism, ensuring the trap would spring on the architect of the crime. When Princess Catherine laid bare the entirety of the treacherous plot, Princess Anne's reaction was terrifying to behold. A deep, volcanic rage seized her. To Anne, a woman who had bled duty and discipline for the crown her entire existence, Camilla's actions were not merely theft. It was an unforgivable act of treason against the memory and the lifelong sacrifices of her mother, the late Queen Elizabeth II. Anne's knuckles turned white as she gripped the antique wood of her desk. Her brilliant mind began calculating 100 counteroffensives per second. The immediate, burning impulse was to deploy royal protection officers to violently eject the mother and daughter from the royal properties entirely. Yet, the cold, calculating strategist within the Princess Royal quickly suppressed the emotional urge. Striking too soon would be a fatal error. Camilla currently possessed the terrifying, unchecked power of a reigning queen consort. She commanded an army of loyalists and media manipulators. If cornered prematurely, Camilla would instantly incinerate the evidence, terminate the staff involved, and effortlessly spin the treason into a narrative of innocent administrative miscommunication. Anne finalized her strategy with terrifying, ice-cold precision. She would not merely stop the theft, she would allow the thieves to willingly march to the gallows. She would let them steal the crown, let them wear it, and then annihilate them in front of the most powerful people on earth. Under the cover of absolute darkness that very night, Princess Anne initiated a Black Ops countermeasure. She bypassed all standard security protocols and summoned Sergeant Thomas White in his Royal Red Guard dress directly to her dimly lit command center. Sergeant Thomas White was a man whose loyalty to the direct bloodline was absolute, completely immune to the political maneuvers of the Queen's office. In total secrecy, Anne issued a direct, classified directive. Under the cover of the graveyard shift, Sergeant Thomas White, in his Royal Red Guard dress, expertly infiltrated the deepest sub-levels of the royal treasury. Moving with total silence, he completely bypassed the multi-million-dollar laser grid systems. With surgical precision, he embedded microscopic, ultra-high-definition cameras directly into the ancient masonry and behind the priceless artifacts surrounding the Lover's Knot pedestal. Every lens was calibrated to ensure a flawless, unobstructed view of the theft. The trap was set, and it operated in the dead silence of the vault for days. As Princess Anne had coldly predicted, Camilla and Laura's insatiable arrogance completely blinded them to the danger. On Princess Anne's encrypted monitoring terminal, the entire tragedy was captured in flawless HD. The footage definitively showed Laura Lopes utilizing highly classified internal security overrides directly provided by Queen Camilla's office, breaching the secure perimeter. The hidden lenses captured every damning second. They recorded Laura's hands physically breaching the environmental seal, lifting the $135 million artifact from its resting place. Most devastatingly, the cameras documented the undeniable triumphant smirks exchanged between mother and daughter as they reveled in their supposed victory over the House of Windsor. Princess Anne securely archived every frame of the apocalyptic evidence, waiting patiently for the exact moment to detonate the charge and bring Camilla's empire crashing to the ground. Back in the blinding reality of the present banquet hall, the suffocating silence following Anne's demand was shattered, as Laura stood entirely paralyzed and Camilla desperately scrambled to project a facade of bewildered authority. The Princess Royal delivered the death blow. With a microscopic nod to the tactical audio-visual team waiting in the wings, the atmosphere of the room radically shifted. The cascading light of the massive crystal chandeliers was instantly killed. In their place, a colossal, cinematic LED screen occupying the entire back wall of the Grand Hall roared to life. Originally slated to project benign historical archives of royal diplomacy, the screen now broadcasted the brutal, unedited reality of the vault breach. Every head of state, every foreign dignitary, and every senior royal snapped their attention to the digital display. A collective shockwave of pure horror radiated through the elite crowd. There, in stark, undeniable high definition, was the footage from exactly 1 week ago. The audience watched in morbid fascination as Laura Lopes infiltrated the treasury, her fingers typing in the sovereign-level master codes that could have only been surrendered by Queen Camilla herself. The entire ballroom held its breath as they witnessed Laura physically removing the Cambridge lover's knot tiara from its velvet pedestal. The final, fatal blow was the crystal-clear display of the mother and daughter's expressions, completely drunk on their own illicit power. A cacophony of vicious whispers and horrified gasps exploded across the room. The deference and diplomatic respect that had been heavily layered upon the Queen and her daughter mere minutes ago completely vanished, instantly replaced by a toxic cloud of mockery, absolute contempt, and disgust. Princess Anne's masterful surgical strike had systematically severed every single avenue of escape. Denial was mathematically impossible. The irrefutable truth was strangling the perpetrators in front of the entire world. Stranded under the intensely punishing glare of the ballroom lights, Laura Lopes was actively being consumed by an unprecedented level of public humiliation. Her entire body shook with such violent force she appeared on the verge of collapsing into the immaculate flooring. The blazing diamonds of the $135 million tiara no longer projected dominance. They had mutated into a physical manifestation of her complete and total disgrace. Crushed beneath the crushing weight of Princess Anne's unblinking, lethal stare, Laura raised her violently trembling hands. Her manicured fingers dug frantically into her elaborate hairstyle, clumsily tearing at the structural pins securing the stolen artifact. Tears of sheer, unadulterated terror and mortification streamed uncontrollably down her flushed face. She forcefully extracted the priceless tiara from her hair, gripping it with both hands out in front of her, looking exactly like a defeated hostile surrendering their weapon to a conquering general. Laura took a hesitant, shaking step forward and surrendered the monarchy's soul back to the crown. Standing isolated in the periphery, Queen Camilla had been drained of her life force. Her normally sharp, calculating eyes were utterly hollowed out by the sheer velocity of the disaster. In a matter of seconds, the immense fortress of psychological dominance and political prestige she had sacrificed her entire life to construct had been violently ripped down to the foundations. Camilla fundamentally understood she possessed no counterattack. The war was over. Completely devoid of any formal dismissal or the slightest shred of royal protocol, the mother and daughter physically folded into themselves. They turned away from the blinding lights and began a horrific, agonizing walk of shame towards the massive mahogany exit doors. The aristocratic crowd aggressively physically recoiled from them, parting the sea of expensive fabric to avoid any proximity to the toxic fallout. Their departure was underscored by a brutal symphony of suppressed laughter and the coldest, most unforgiving glares the British elite could manifest. When the heavy wooden doors finally slammed shut behind the disgraced faction, the chaotic, suffocating tension in the ballroom violently depressurized, immediately replaced by a heavy, reverent silence. The Cambridge lover's knot tiara had been secured. It now rested on a pristine navy blue velvet presentation cushion held with absolute reverence by Sergeant Thomas Wright in his Royal Red Guard dress. The iconic teardrop pearls caught the restored light of the chandeliers, blazing with a spectacular, almost purified brilliance, completely cleansed of the treasonous intent that had briefly tarnished it. Princess Anne initiated a slow, highly deliberate walk towards the velvet cushion. Her posture was the physical embodiment of a monarchical titan who had just successfully executed a major defensive campaign. With absolute authority, she lifted the $135 million masterpiece into her hands. The Princess Royal's terrifying gaze swept meticulously over the silent crowd before locking on one precise location. She entirely ignored the glaringly empty chairs left in Camilla's wake. Instead, Anne focused the absolute entirety of the ballroom's attention directly onto Catherine. Acknowledging the unspoken command in Anne's eyes, Catherine stepped out of the crowd and into the center of the hall. The future queen's emotional state was an intricate tapestry of intense relief and somber respect. Crucially, her elegantly sculpted features displayed absolutely zero arrogance, no hint of a victor's gloating over a slaughtered enemy. She projected only the terrifying, stoic calm required of a true sovereign. As Catherine halted in the direct center of the stage, the hundreds of global power brokers refocused their energy. This time, the gazes were not loaded with scandal or judgment, but with an overwhelming, unified wave of profound admiration and submission. Princess Anne maintained intense eye contact with Catherine and executed a microscopic, incredibly rare nod of her head. It was a silent, earth-shattering transfer of ultimate respect and gratitude. In full view of the global elite, Princess Anne hoisted the Queen Mary treasure high into the air. With agonizingly slow, reverent precision, Anne lowered the historical artifact directly onto Catherine's head. The millisecond the diamonds and pearls anchored themselves into Catherine's hair, the entire ballroom felt the tectonic plates of power permanently shift. This was not a simple return of stolen property. This was a spectacularly violent public coronation of influence. It was Anne officially declaring to the world that Catherine was the supreme, untouchable future of the bloodline. It was a vicious warning shot to any remaining internal enemies that the crown jewels and the power they represent will strictly remain with those who possess unwavering loyalty to the institution. Catherine executed a flawless, mathematically perfect bow of her head. It was an ancient, deeply traditional gesture of respect. When she rose, the Cambridge lover's knot blazed with terrifying authority. Catherine was no longer just the Princess of Wales. She had instantly been elevated into an indestructible pillar of the institution. While Catherine's power was fundamentally cemented into the bedrock of the palace, the agonizing destruction of Queen Camilla's network had only just begun. The diplomatic banquet eventually concluded, but the ancient stone corridors of Buckingham Palace were actively vibrating with the shockwaves of a massive institutional purge. The explosion at the banquet had unleashed a catastrophic, highly systematic dismantling of the Queen Consort's entire operational infrastructure. For Camilla, the true torture was not the public humiliation itself, but the terrifyingly silent, efficient way the palace machinery immediately turned against her. In the suffocating, cold isolation of her private quarters, Camilla stared blankly into an ornate mirror, fully comprehending her complete annihilation. The vast, intricate web of powerful allies, loyal journalists, and indebted aristocrats she had manipulated for years had instantly evaporated. The sycophantic aides who had previously hung on her every word now practically sprinted in the opposite direction when they saw her coming. Her encrypted phones remained completely, horrifically dead. The fear she had weaponized to maintain her status had instantly mutated into open, aggressive contempt. She understood that while the crown technically remained on her head in official documents, her actual operational power had been reduced to absolute zero. She was now a ghost haunting her own palace. Simultaneously, a new, terrifying operational reality was being enforced. Operating entirely on Princess Anne's uncompromising directives, the Royal Protection Command initiated a brutal palace-wide lockdown. Heavily armed security units aggressively swept the perimeters. Every single digital access code, every master key, and every unrecorded privilege that Camilla had quietly distributed to her loyalists was immediately and permanently completely wiped from the mainframe. The new established protocols were unforgiving. Any future access to sovereign artifacts now fundamentally required a physically signed, multi-layered authorization from the immediate bloodline royals. This was a merciless, surgical extraction of the Queen Consort's lingering influence. In the aftermath, Princess Anne's command center became the new, undisputed heart of the monarchy. Sitting directly adjacent to the Princess Royal at the massive oak desk was Princess Catherine. The younger woman had undergone a terrifying evolution. The sheer weight of the tiara she now unofficially commanded had forged her into a much sharper, more formidable weapon. Together, the two women systematically dismantled and rebuilt the entire operational rulebook of the royal household. They scrutinized every security flaw and overhauled every protocol. They effectively built an impenetrable, steel fortress around the monarchy's legacy. The combined force of Princess Anne's terrifying experience and unyielding brutality perfectly merged with Princess Catherine's sharp tactical mind and absolute integrity, created an unstoppable vanguard. They did not merely survive the scandal, they completely weaponized it to eradicate the cancer of unchecked ambition from the palace corridors. Every new directive they issued broadcasted a lethal, undeniable truth to the world. The true power of the monarchy cannot be stolen, manipulated, or worn by those without honor. It belongs strictly to those willing to defend the crown at all costs, crushing any threat that dares to challenge the sacred continuity of the throne. After hearing this devastating breakdown of royal protocol and consequence, do you believe Princess Anne's aggressive tactical strike was the correct method of enforcing justice, or was the public annihilation of the Queen Consort a step too far? Let me know your thoughts down below. Please like this video, share it, subscribe to the channel, and click the video on your screen right now for more unprecedented royal insights.